Mr. Bob Ryan, a journalist. Bob, how are you doing, sir?
Hey, it's nice to see you again, Coop. I'm doing fine. Thank you very much. We're healthy and, everything's okay.
Listen, we know you're busy, so let's get to it, right to the heart of it. Just
follow me. I'm fine.
Okay. Bob, tell us what it was growing up in Trenton, New Jersey, what it was like in your family.
I didn't know how good it was until later on in terms of the fact that the two things that I care most about outside of, real life and family, sports and music. And it turns out that Trenton was 45 minutes north of Philadelphia and 60 miles southwest of New York. And so you had access to both. And I did my father was involved in sports. So I grew up going to ball games at Polo Grounds and Connie Mack Stadium and the Palestra from time I was 6 years old. And then did the coverage of on television. Who knew? It was the television capital of America in the 50s. No one knew it because we got every channel in Philly and every channel in New York. Now, most people in most areas of America in the 50s got 3 channels, the network channels in their area, right? They got one for CBS, one for NBC, and one for ABC, and that's it. Well, we had everything on the dial but channel 8, everything else. And so I got to see baseball games. The Yankees and Giants played on channel 11. The Dodgers played on channel 9. The Phillies played on channel 6. So I got access to that. So, and it's a sports-minded town. High school sports were big. American Legion baseball was very big. We won the Babe Ruth League World Series twice in 1956 and 1962. Yada, yada, yada. Okay, A. And then B, when rock and roll hit circa 1955, with Bill Haley in the comments and then Elvis and all that, we got the New York channels stations and the Philly stations. So you had the double dose of that. And for the final thing, we were an hour from the Jersey Shore. So it really was an excellent place to grow up. And I did, you don't know these things when you're a kid, you take everythting for granted. It was only later on when I realized, boy, I was lucky.
Hey, Bob, did you ever play any sports? Did you play any sports?
I was a normal childhood, Little League Baseball. I was an all-star. I'm a first baseman.
First base?
First base, that's a position for somebody who's slow with a bad arm. So they put him at first. I had good hands.
This is underhand pitching or overhand pitching?
No, this is the Little League. This is the baseball. And I love basketball and baseball. I played basketball right up through prep school. That's the one sport I was able to play on a scholastic level, on prep school, New Jersey level. I played basketball, and I played basketball into my 40s and pickup. I love playing basketball. I was born to play 3-on-3 and winners out, which means you don't have to play any defense.
Bob, listen, on this show, we have fun on this show. I'm sorry, Nick.
I had a hook and a jump hook.
He had a sky hook.
Okay. I thought you were stuck because as we get older, our muscles don't move the right way.
I had a hook, and also my idol in high school years, teenage years, was Nick Workman of Seton Hall, and Nick Workman was the master of shooting with his back to the basket. He had all the back. He was a 6'3" postman, and he had all this dipsy doodle stuff about. And I worked at hours. And when I played pickup ball, believe me, and my big thing was posting up. I think it's the most fun you can have, which is why I'm so sad about the fact that the NBA is going over to 3-point madness and nobody posts up anymore.
I'm with you.
See another Kevin McHale. But anyway, so that was my level. I couldn't go any farther than that. I tried out when I went to Boston College in 1964. I did try out for the freshman team. Well, it just so happened that year they had 6 scholarship players and 2 other guys who turned down D1, well, it wasn't D1 then, it was called for University Division, scholarships because they wanted to play for Bob Cousy. So we had 8 level scholarships. So 75 of us tried out for the remaining 4 spots. And I made the first cut. That was my honor claim to fame. I didn't get cut first. I made the first cut, but I never made it. So that was the end of wearing a uniform. But I played pickup ball. Also, Coop, I refereed. I love refereeing. One year at BC, I refereed both the championship game of the day league and the night league.
Well, Bob, you know what? You're better than me because I got cut on my high school team in the 9th grade. So listen, Bobby, jumping ahead real quick because I got one more question about high school. Were you a bully or did you get bullied?
No, I would be the latter. I was far from a bully. I was a lover, not a fighter. No way. I was no. I'm never a tough guy. I never masqueraded as one either. Believe me.
So, like you said, Bob, you graduated in '68 in history. Where did journalism come in? to this?
It all began. I always had an affinity for writing, and I was good with words. And when I went to the prep school I went to, it was an opportunity to write extensively. I wrote for the school paper. I became the sports editor of the school paper, and all the courses that weren't mathematical science emphasized writing, history, English, even foreign language. When you learn French, which I loved, you wound up reading books and writing your tests. So anyway, I had an affinity for writing. And then I went to school at Boston College and worked for the school paper. I also did basketball broadcast play-by-play for 4 years. And that was fun. I love that. And I was long story short, I was offered an opportunity for an internship interview at the Boston Globe in the summer after I graduated. I got accepted, started there June 10th, 1968. And except for one little detour into television for about 17 months, I worked at the Globe until I retired in 2012.
You listen to Showtime with Coop. We got Bob Ryan in the house, man. And Bob, you know what? You and I hate to say this because you're a Celtic lover. You're probably one of the best journalists that I enjoyed speaking with. We're at this stage of the show where I have a segment I call Coop's Lightning Round. I'm going to ask you 5 questions, 5 names, and you tell us as much or as little about the names, okay?
Fair.
First one, Tommy Heinson.
Tommy Heinson was a very complicated and interesting man. Obviously a Hall of Fame player and an athlete. When he retired at age 30 due to bad knees. I mean, today, he would have been scoped. He's one of countless people who were born too soon in terms of medical advancement. Right? He's an all-time Hall of Fame player. Great. I can still see him with that hook shot from the corner and a line drive jump shot. He was famous for, Coop, because in high school, the gym had a low ceiling. And he had to shoot line. That's the folklore anyway. That's the story he came up with, and we all bought it for a year. He had line drive jump shot and great offensive rebounder and a clutch player. And then after he retired, he became an insurance salesman right away, and he was an award-winning insurance salesman. Like seriously, he's like insurance salesman of the year, kind of thing. And he also did some whatever was available, not that much in the very very beginning of his retirement, color for Celtic games, and then eventually in 1969, after Russ retired, and Red named him coach. He had never even coached a youth league. He never coached anything for a day in his life. It was all on the job training, and he took to it right away. And of course, he had Red behind him. He had Red to lean on to help with some technical support. But Tommy had to learn how to coach on the job, and we had a up and down relationship. It was up to start. It's a long story, but it all ended great. No,
I have one question.
It was all said and done. We were friends the last 42 years of his life. I can tell you that.
I can't believe I'm saying this because I love Tommy Heinson. He actually made Michael Cooper a household name when he was doing the games on CBS by saying I was a good player. Go ahead, Nick.
Michael Cooper.
The whole generation, and it's a fascinating career. Obviously, he's in the Hall of Fame as a player and coach, one of the hair and the Philip guys that for whom that's true. And he had a successful career as a broadcaster where he's a icon and Celtic fans. And he's very much missed around here. But, he if anybody's Mr. Celtic, it would be Tommy Heinson, who obviously played and coached and broadcast starting in 1956 until he died in 2020.
Bob, top 75, Heinson, did you have him in yours when you voted?
I honestly don't remember. No, seriously.
I know he's not there. I don't know if
I want to guess I didn't, but that's a hard call. It's a hard call. I voted. I was privileged to vote for the 50 and the 75, and it's an honor, but boy, it's a responsibility. And it's
Coop. I wonder if he voted for Bob McAdoo in the top 50.
I would tell you something. No, I'll give you the honest truth. I effed up. I thought I went on my list 100 times. And after it was over and I submitted my ballot, I went, oh, my God, I left him off. It was not intentional. I'm embarrassed. It's my biggest, 3-time MVP. If any city outside of Buffalo appreciated McAdoo, it was Boston because of the great rivalry we had with them in those days and his head-to-head with Counts. And I know how I'm embarrassed. So you expose me here, Nick. I'm going to probably, but I forgot to vote for Bob McAdoo. But
I know McAdoo a lot.
But what's good, he made it. And I don't say if he had not made it, I would have felt 10 times worse. He made it. So despite my screwing up, he made it, and he deserved to be on there.
Well, I'm going to call you out again, Bob. Now that I know that you're doing all this voting and stuff, I need to be in the Hall of Fame. I'm going to pump myself. So I need your vote and get a word out there, okay? Second name, Bob, for you, Rick Mahorn.
Rick Mahorn is a funny story attached to Rick Mahorn, the pride of Hampton Institute, and one of the Johnny Most, the announcers, missed McFilthy and McNasty when he played with Jeff in Baltimore. Rick Mahorn, he was a tough guy, to say the least, right? So he got thrown out of a game against the Celtics early in the game, and I asked Darryl Garrettson if the referees have certain extra scrutiny on certain people, if they're and he admitted it, yeah. And I think I even kind of admit that Mahorn was one of those people, that he was a recidivist, he was all right. So I write this, and to some degree, I put it in my Sunday column that Mahorn, is one of those guys who gets extra scrutiny. The next time the Washington Bullets came to Boston in the first quarter, Mahorn committed a foul, and I used to sit. No, excuse me. At home, I sat next to the visiting bench so I could hear and see what was going on there. Because on the road, they would always put us next to our own bench, So I wanted to sit next to the visiting bench, which I did. So they called a foul. I forget who it was. Doesn't matter. On Rick. Gene Shue jumps up, turns around, points a finger in my face, said, "That's your fault, Bob Ryan. Your fault." Well, I was kind of proud of that, actually.
There you go. Hey, man, fuck Rick Mahorn. Anyway, Red Auerbach. That's the next one. Red Auerbach.
There's so many things to talk about Red. Red was I won't throw the word genius around, but whoever said, and it was of Red Auerbach, as somebody said, the rest of them are playing checkers, he's playing chess. And he's one of the people about whom they said. Obviously an NBA pioneer, was there from day one in 1946. It was the right coach for the right guy. Not everybody would have appealed to Bill Russell, frankly. I think they would have mishandled Bill Russell and not understood what his game was all about, not appreciated the person he was, might have tried to, but Red did instinctively, and Red and Russell appreciated it. The interesting thing about Coop, he's a guy, he did not treat, this was not Vince Lombardi. He did not treat them all the same. He had different rules and a way of approach different people. He approached Cousy one way, he coached Sharman another way. He coached Heinson was the designated yeller. He yelled at Heinson when he wanted Russell to do something. He yelled at Heinson. Tommy, see, he knew Tommy would understand. That was his role. Tommy, we used to joke about this all the time. I just give you a funny. He had a sense of humor, Red. People that yeah. And one day he says to me, "Who's the greatest sixth man of all time?" I said, "Well, Havlicek." "No." "Well, Ramsey?" "No." "Well, Red, I have no idea who he's talking about." He said, "Chinky Shapiro." I said, "Who's Chinky Shapiro?" He said, He was the timer in Rochester." Now, Coop, were you around when Feats Brody was in New York? Was the guard? Do you remember that name at all?
No.
Well, he was the timer in New York for many years. Feats Brody, Brody, and he was notorious. He had the fastest hand or the slowest hand, whatever the Knicks needed. Let me tell you, he was famous for that. Well, but apparently he must have learned from Chinky, because Red said it was Chinky was the best scorekeeper at the time.
Hey, Bob, I'm old. I'm not that old, but I hear you, baby. I hear you. And my comment about Rick Mahorn, listen, Rick and I coach in the Big Three, so he knows how I feel about him. So I can say that out loud because I'll say it to his face. But Rick Mahorn is a lovely guy.
Oh, I've met him, and I've met him at functions. I know. Here's the other thing. He was, and there's another thing I think about Rick Mahorn, and right after there was an expansion, right after the Pistons won the first time, and he was put up for expansion within 2 weeks of, which is so cruel. That was so. I can't imagine how he felt about that. At the time, but
he hated it in Philadelphia, didn't he? He hated it in Philly, I think.
Yeah,
he hated going to Philadelphia, and I think they were like on the parade when he got drafted in the expansion draft.
It wasn't good.
Parade.
It was poorly. It was timing was awful. It was awful. Mm-hmm. But hey, he was a tough guy. I'll tell you, no question.
Hey, Bob, our fourth name, Magic Johnson.
Well, Urban, have just absolute utmost respect for as a player, and I'm so proud to know him. And he did the foreword on the book I did with Larry Bird, and he was so happy and eager to do it, and I'm really grateful for that. I have nothing but the highest regard for and his game and the way he got better and better. The fact that he made himself into a reliable outside shooter, 3-point shooter. I was present at the famous Bird Magic NCAA final. And what I remember about, in addition to that, not the game, I remember them into the semifinal game more in terms of the logistics of it. And that was that I think he went into that tournament wanting to show the pros, the scouts, they could shoot. And he took a lot of outside shots in the semis against Penn. And I think he wanted to show them that he could shoot, and he did. He made those shots. But, I mean, what can you say? I can still see him going coast to coast. When I think of certain people going coast to coast, I think of him. I think of Charles, naturally, Barkley, but Magic. I mean, Magic at his peak doing that ball and of course, let's get to it. The greatest individual game I've ever seen a player play, and count me among those who believe that Game 6 in Philadelphia, 1970, the 20-year-old Magic Johnson, 42 points, 15 rebounds, 7 assists, literally playing at one time or another, all 5, spots. And technically, and it was, talk about clutch. I can tell you this: after Kareem got hurt in Game 5, and we knew he wasn't going to make the trip to Philly, and so Game 7 is going to be back in LA. We totally assumed we were going back to LA. The only thing we were talking about in the media was where we're going to go for dinner when we get back to LA after Game 6, and Magic comes up and plays that game. Plus, I'm going to throw this one out. However, the greatest tidbit of that game is the sneakiest, quietest 37 points anyone ever scored by Jamal Wilkes.
Everybody forgets that, Bob.
37 points.
Yeah.
Just very quietly, very, very unobtrusively.
Bob, the last name on this list, you obviously know who I'm going to ask you about, but the reason why I put these two together, because I say this, in the 70s, and you can talk a little bit more about it later on, but in the 70s, basketball was just kind of like ho-hum and all drum. Larry Bird and Magic Johnson changed this game, and they made it exciting. They made their players be accountable for their actions on the court. Tell us about Larry Bird.
Well, in passing, the fact that the thing that they both did best, they did other things, but the thing they both did best was pass. So that certainly starts with in Larry's case as well. He lived passing. They came along, and the league was so lucky. Not only did they come along the same year, but they came along in the franchises where they were, which were they had a little history back, from the 60s naturally, and you were able to. They both went to the right place, in a sense, and that was made it exponentially better. And they respected each other so much on the court. Didn't really get to know each other well until midway through the career. So, but and then of course they became very friendly and still are to this day. But Larry, look, so many things I can say about Larry on the court. I'm going to throw this one out at you, Coop, and and we'll get to you and Larry. I'll get to you and Larry. And my belief is that nobody in the history of the game ever accomplished more with the ball in his hands less than Larry Bird. I mean, the difference, when I look at LeBron today, now the two greatest passing forwards of all time are Larry and LeBron. I mean, Rick Barry will be yelling, and what about me? All right, fine. But those are my answers, okay? But LeBron, first of all, he's not he's a queen on the chessboard, but as a player, he has the ball all the time. And he should. We don't argue with that. He don't need a point guard. You got LeBron. But Larry was, hey, who knows better than you? Larry was thinking 2 steps ahead, about was going to do the ball before he got it. He could see who was where he had a picture in his head of where everybody was. And he had limited touches to get the assist that he got, as opposed to any other passing forward you want to name. And that's the most amazing thing to me is what he accomplished with the ball in his hands, as infrequently as it really was. Now, as the man who guarded them better than anybody else, which Larry Bird will be the first person to tell the world, what's your feeling about that? Did you feel that he always had the ball, or did you? Because one reason he didn't when they played the Lakers is that you were keeping him from getting the ball. Well, that was your job.
People always ask me, who's the hardest player I've ever had to guard? And there was Michael Jordan, George Gervin, the late, great Mike Mitchell. I mean, so many players. I always say Larry Bird, and I say this for the reason because with Larry, okay, say if you're guarding Michael, when Michael passed the basketball, he kind of hung on his shorts and he sit off to the side. With Larry, when he passed the basketball is when he became more dangerous. He was either setting a pick, coming off a pick, catching the ball, passing the ball. So he was the one you always had to stay attentive to the whole 24 seconds of that offensive play for the Celtics. And you know what? Oh, he's going to get an offensive rebound. He was going to do something to help his team have the best chance of scoring at that point. So I always say it's him. So I'm with you, Bob. He didn't need the basketball to affect the game. Obviously, he was great with the basketball, but he did so many other setting good picks for people.
And who else can you say that about to that degree? Nobody. I remember in the prime, when Michael was on his ascendancy and Larry and Magic ruled, and here comes Michael, and then Michael eventually became the guy. We all know that. You know, I said there's one thing I just want to tell you folks. I said there's one thing that I saw Larry Bird. Now this is the gospel truth, verifiable. One night in Phoenix, they were losing big time at the half, and they come out in the third quarter, and Larry did not take a shot, but dominated the game. He had 7 assists in the third quarter, and they came back and won the game. And that's example of the thing. He could affect the game without taking a shot more than Michael could never do that. Never. Michael had to have the ball. I mean, to do it, had to have it, and had to. And I'm not gonna. I won't. I'll leave Magic on. I'll let you address this aspect of it for Magic, but for Larry, it was amazing, and no one to the degree that Larry Bird did, it affected the game more without even having the ball with his hands or taking or at least not taking a shot.
You know what, Bob? I was friends with Dennis Johnson. You know, we grew up here in California and all that. And Dennis, he told me this one story. We were playing, I guess it was in 84, 85, one of the series. But Casey Jones was drawing up a play. And Larry was kind of like watching. And then finally Larry said, hey, coach, give me the fucking ball till everybody get out the way. I love that story because that's dominance there. That's some shit only great ones say and do.
Yeah, he would feel comfortable doing that. And you know, you wouldn't take offense. Yeah.